I'll start again. Welcome to this meeting of Cabinet being held on Wednesday, the 19th of November at 6 o'clock in the Town Hall. We start with apologies for absence, and I'm not aware of any. So we move on to declarations of interest.
Ed must be on his way.
He is. Yeah. He should be on his way. Yes, as far as I know, he is coming. So yeah. Minutes of the previous meeting are on pages 9 to 24. Are we happy to agree them as an accurate record? Good, thank you very much. So we're now on to item 4, which is addresses by members of the public, and that's you. So please do step up and use the microphone. You hit the button on the right, and when the microphone goes red, that means it's on. So over to you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bashir Ahmed, Chairman of Qualter. On the 10th of January 2019, the Oxford Hackney Carriage Trade was presented with the proposals to change from diesel taxis to the new electric taxis. At the time, 6 years seemed a reasonable time for the transition, but unfortunately, then came the COVID-19. The taxi trade lost 4 years of work because of the coronavirus. Along with that came the new trend of people working from home. This trend has continued as people are still working from home, and we have lost all the work in the morning and evening, people who used to travel to work and then coming back in the evening. And then there's the Botley Road. To make matters worse, the closure of Botley Road, we have lost all our work going toward Botley and beyond. There is no guarantee when the Botley Road will reopen. Keep giving dates, but never to the time scale. As if this wasn't bad enough, last summer, the summer of 2024, the nightclubs on the 30th of June in Oxford permanently shut their doors and closed down. There's not a single nightclub for the revelers. There are no revelers during the week, nor the weekends. The city centre has become a ghost town at night. Uber, with the licensing of Uber in Oxford in December 2024, that's last December, we have witnessed private hire drivers from other areas coming and operating in Oxford, such as Southampton, licensed private hires, and Portsmouth, and even Wolverhampton. Uber is a £53 billion of international company. Uber subsidizes their fares during their promotion periods, only promotion periods, which no one can match. But once established in the cities, they have peak and out of hours rip-off crazy fares. I'm not sure if the councillors are aware of this. For example, St. Clement, which is less than a mile from the city centre, they charge £21. And then on the opening day of the football season this year, that's about a month and a half ago, from rail station to Kassam Stadium, while we were charging £12, they were charging £38 per fare. Now, the electric taxi, the price of the new London-style wheelchair accessible taxi has gone up again from £75,000 to £82,000. And that is if you have that money sitting in the bank to buy it cash outright. But if you buy it on loans and interest, it's £105,000. It's a lot of money. And if you haven't got the money, it's a huge amount of money to ask to buy a new cab. The proprietors in Oxford who have changed, most of them, but not all of them, at the time took full advantage of the £7,000 government grant, £5,000 council grant, plus 3 years of taxi license fee relief, and also the cheaper electricity at the time. Well, the electric has now gone up from 18 pence to 74 pence per kilowatt, and the grants are no longer available from the council. We have demonstrated our intention that we want to work with the City Council and therefore 43% of our proprietors have already changed over to the electric taxis. Now, concerns about pollution in the city, any concerns about pollution in the city is more than mitigated in the context of introduction of 159 electric buses on the city bus routes in 2024. This is last year, as well as 43 new London-style wheelchair accessible electric taxis. We as a trade are doing our bit for the environment. So no one can say that the taxi drivers don't care, because we do. We live here, our children live here, and people of our city live here. Other cities have given longer time to their trade. For example, Coventry has given their trade till 2030. South Cambridgeshire has given their city taxi trades 2030. Rochdale 2030, Manchester 2030, and Reading till 2028. But for their TX4, which has Euro 6 engines, there is ongoing negotiation for 2030 and 32. We are thankful to the City Council, but the taxi trade is under a heap of pressure because of the cost of the vehicle. It's a huge amount of money, £105,000, and we are trying to do our best to buy them, and would like to request additional time for the smooth transition, given all the difficulties and the circumstances. And if anyone has any question about, well, it's a bit unfair on the drivers who have already changed into electric. It's not, because they've taken advantage of these grants and the license fees, so they were happy and they wanted to change. So I'd like to thank the council for giving us the opportunity to address you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming along today to address us as Cabinet. I wanted to just briefly explain why, when you've already had this report come to the Licensing Committee, that it was here, that it's now here today with Cabinet. And that is because we had taken some legal advice about where we take these decisions. And that legal advice suggested that we hadn't put forward the right measures in our constitution to make sure that Licensing Committee and therefore Council could take this decision. And therefore, at the moment, the default position is that this decision needs to be taken by Cabinet. So that's why it's at Cabinet today, so that we can make sure that this decision is taken in a timely way, well, as timely as we can make it under the circumstances. We will continue in the future to take this sort of decision at Licensing and then Council, and we are making the relevant changes to our constitution at the next Council meeting. So this is a one-off decision by Cabinet on a taxi licensing policy issue, but that's because the legal advice that we have taken suggests that this is the best way of making sure that we can get a decision through in time for the trade. So I just wanted to explain that. Emma, is there anything that I've missed there? No. Okay, in which case, Anna, is there anything you wanted to say in response to the actual address?
I think we will do so in the sort of substance of the main meeting when we talk about the report. I hope you feel that the report sort of addresses your key concerns. So yeah, I think we will take it in the round in that, if that is all right.
That's fine. So thank you very much. We'll now move on to well, in a second we'll hear from scrutiny. But I will just run through the next items on the agenda. So the next one is councillor addresses on any item for decision, and we have none. Councillor addresses on neighbourhood issues, and we have none. Items raised by cabinet members, and we have none. So that takes us to item 8, which is reports from the Scrutiny Committee. And Alex, that's over to you.
Thank you very much. So the Scrutiny Committee met on the 11th of November. We considered one substantive item, which was the item before you today, the Hackney Carriage Vehicle Emission Standards Amendment. It's fair to say that the discussion was extensive. there were concerns raised by a number of members of the Scrutiny Committee regarding the process, and we're very thankful to Emma, who spent quite a long time helping members to understand the process, as you've just explained to the public speakers, around why the decision was coming to Cabinet this time rather than to full council. And so quite a lot of our early stages of the meeting were focused on that matter. We then moved on to consider the substance. Now, in discussion, members raised concerns about the proposal to peg the date to the date of the local government reorganisation. So some members felt that that was the right course of action. Other members felt that it was not the right course of action. It was something on which there was not agreement within the committee. And accordingly, there's no recommendations regarding the exact date. Where we did end up having two recommendations. Firstly, it was around a concern that there was not parity between the standards placed upon private hire vehicles compared to those of hackney carriages, and one of the recommendations of the Scrutiny Committee coming out of the meeting was that there was an effort to harmonise and ensure consistency between private hire vehicles and hackney carriages going forward. And secondly, we recommended that in the event that Cabinet approves the delay to the implementation of the local government reorganisation, a timescale should be applied once that is possible by means of the national government's decision. I think that's all there is to summarise, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Anna.
Yes, no, thank you very much for that summary, Alex. I'm glad it was shorter than the meeting itself, considerably shorter. So in terms of the two recommendations, totally fine with the second one. I think that's entirely sensible. I think, we should be finding out what the landscape for local government reorganisation looks like in maybe like summer next year. However, the first one, I think, to be honest, I think we should probably slightly revise the comment in the document, and that is entirely on me. I think, to be honest, I think doing huge amounts of work right now to try and harmonise the emission standards for private hire vehicles with hackney vehicles, given the paper that is in front of us this morning and given the sort of wider context of LGR, it does not make a huge amount of sense to my mind to invest large amounts of officer time to do that for a council that's not going to exist in 2 years' time. And I think, there will be a great body of work from whichever local authority ends up running Oxford and its like environs, and its surrounding area to do, to bring all of the other districts' taxi policies in line with each other. So I think it genuinely does not make a huge amount of sense to invest large amounts of office time in moving forward with that, for a council that's not going to exist in 2 years' time. So, yes, we have accepted one of the recommendations, not the first one, and I hope that is acceptable.
Thanks very much, Anna. Okay, I think in that case, we are now on the substantive item, which is the deferral of the commencement of the hackney carriage vehicle emission standards. So thank you very much, Alex. So Anna, over to you.
Yes, sorry, this is a meeting where I have to, you have to listen to me speak quite a lot. So, okay, so the wider context of this paper is on the 1st of, status quo, on the 1st of January next year, to license a hackney carriage will require it to be essentially fully electric. There are three options laid out in the paper to do with this. The first one is to just accept that and roll forward with it. The second is to extend it by a year. It was already extended by a year, just over a year ago. And the third one is to essentially delay until local government reorganisation and leave this up to whichever council ends up running Oxford. So the recommended option here is the last one, which is to essentially delay the implementation of this low emissions vehicle standards on hackneys until LGR. So I think, where we're coming from, well, certainly where I'm coming from with this is, we don't want to put the trade in trouble in a time of, both great uncertainty when it comes to LGR. When the boundaries of Oxford are expanded, there will be, like even the smallest option, there'll be hundreds more hackneys in the city. And also, you know, as Bashir very ably laid out, you know, there are huge amounts of other difficulties for the trade at the moment as well. So, you know, I won't sort of repeat what he said because he did a good job of laying it out there. So, you know, the data for all of this is laid out very clearly in the report, and it all sort of points us into being in quite a different place when this decision was first taken in 2019. You know, we've got electricity prices, we've got all of the things with Botley Road, we've got all of the things with congestion. You know, there's also some good news in here as well, which is that, you know, even the sort of existing diesel stock of Hackney carriages that we had in 2019 have actually also improved over the past 6 years as well. So we're not even comparing against the same baseline that we were. You know, there are other things here as well. You know, we do not want, so, you know, 40% of the trade more or less has already converted to electric vehicles. But given the deadline is now 2 months away, you know, we do not want a cliff edge in terms of, you know, black cabs, our wheelchair accessible taxis in the city. If this, you know, if this emissions policy goes through as it is currently meant to. So, you know, the LGR context as well also needs to be taken into account. You know, we don't want to put our existing black cabs in Oxford, which, you know, we're very proud of, at a massive disadvantage to the sort of intake from the wider, you know, thing. If, you know, if we make every single black cab, or the 60% who haven't already upgraded, you know, take out loans, do huge amounts of investment, which other taxis coming into the local authority will not have had to do. I, you know, feel that generally that's pretty unfair on, you know, the taxi drivers that we are meant to represent. So yeah, as I said before, you know, super proud of having black cabs in Oxford. I think the most important thing here is to listen to what the trade is telling us, but also make decisions backed up by the data as well. I'm happy that we're doing that here, and therefore we'll be backing recommendation 1, which I might as well just read it out, is to delay the implementation on the 1st of January 2026 of the ultra low emissions vehicle standards for Hackney carriage vehicles to be revisited by such a successful organisation that results from local government reorganisation. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Anna. Richard and Joshua, did you want to add anything?
No, I don't think so. Not this time. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. So open to questions and comments. Alex and Ed.
Mine relates to paragraphs 1 to 11, which is not the issue that was just being discussed. So I'll wait.
Ed.
Thanks. Yeah, I was going to speak in support of the recommendation, actually. I mean, so I think, and I wanted to take a bit of a step back and think about the type of taxi infrastructure we need to see in Oxford. We need to have availability of taxis. We want also to have taxis which, as far as possible, contribute to cleaner air. And we want a greener fleet, of course we do. We want them to be available. They're really important for safety. But I think it's also right to acknowledge that we are an authority which regulates harder than many. You know, we still retain the numbers cap on hackneys. And in a way, it is a backhanded compliment to ourselves that there are people who choose to register somewhere else because they think they might get an easy ride. And in Oxford, you know, we take our duties very seriously. And I say this for all sorts of reasons which are known around this table. The day when the government says people have to be registered in the authority area that they work and get their licence there cannot come soon enough. You know, we are the best authority to judge who operates in Oxford. In that context, I also absolutely recognise the picture which we've heard painted tonight by Anna, but also by trade representatives about the challenges faced by the trade at the moment. You know, I don't totally recognise the ghost town picture, if I'm honest, but I think it applies, you know, on many nights. The Botley Road is clearly a huge issue. And you know, some associated uncertainties around transport policy as well. The demise of nightlife, the COVID impacts, actually an impact as well, albeit somewhat earlier, from Oxford Parkway Station coming on stream where, which is outside our municipal boundary, and it's just a very, very difficult climate at the moment. So, and there's no question in my mind that while a high quality service is provided by many private hired drivers, and it's also good to see local operators part of that mix and more of them springing up. The Hackneys really are a particularly special part of the offer, very high selling jewel in the crown. I think if we were to go marching headlong into the previous commitment, then we would be sort of almost decapitating one of the highest quality and most important parts of the offer. So I strongly support the recommendations in this. And I also think we need to make our voices heard to government that this is an area where if things go right, they make a really positive difference to the public transport offer in a city. And if things go wrong, the consequences can actually be quite horrendous. And that's why post LGR, the government, I think, needs also to make sure local authorities have the tools they need to regulate this properly. Those are my reflections and why I strongly support Anna's recommendations.
And certainly I've taken every opportunity I've had when talking to relevant government ministers to emphasise the point that particularly the point about local authorities being the right place, the local authority that in which cabs are operating should be the local authority in which they're registered. And I feel there is some movement there, which we can be hopeful about, but we'll have to wait and see. Don't think anything has been formally announced yet. Alex, you had a point.
Yes, it was a question, but I shall combine it with a comment and do them the other way around. So in terms of comment, completely agree everything that Councillor Turner and Councillor Railton have said for the reasons set out. Completely agree with the need for the decision, partly because there will be a different local government. So if the government does decide to award the power to local governments to control their taxis, we don't yet know what the boundaries of that are. But it will happen in 2 years' time, and then we will see. So this seems like a rational step forward. My question, and it does reflect, I think perhaps like Councillor Turner, I think Ghost Town might overstate it slightly, but it's clearly quieter, the city centre at night. And it strikes me then as slightly odd that there are still some of our colleagues who think we should have a saturation policy for licensed premises when there are fewer, and it's having a significant knock-on impact on our traders in the terms of taxis, the Hackneys. What I wanted to ask about was clarification of the legal position. So it's not related to the decision, it's related to why we are making that decision. And specifically, as I've understood this, we are taking this decision because council, as in not council, but a KC or equivalent thereof, has said that we have not adequately followed the appropriate law, which is there must be an explicit decision by full council that this power should rest with our licensing committee, which is where we intend to send it back as soon as we've finished. I'd like to know how a decision which council took based on implementing a constitution, which it has done, I don't know how many times, dozens of times, which explicitly says in that constitution that this power rests with the licensing committee. How much more explicit does a decision need to be? And I ask about this, but also there may be other decisions, whether it's this legislation or other legislation, because this seems like an extraordinary state of affairs where we may need to be explicit that we're making a decision about something when we're making that decision explicitly. And I'm beginning to think that our council has got a little overexcited. So I'd like some thought on that.
Emma, I think that's definitely one for you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. The reason it's coming before Cabinet isn't based on legislation, it's based on a very discrete point in a very limited case, which considered taxi licensing in particular and how it was reserved to council versus defaults to cabinet. So in line with general practice, I agree. It would clearly usually be sufficient that council approves the constitution, and I've got no concerns that in more general terms, we do so adequately each year and everything within it. Because of this case law in relation to particularly taxi licensing, council is of the view that it needed to be a clear and explicit statement within the recommendations that cabinet agreed, council agreed that they reserved it to itself. So I don't have concerns that it's a wider issue, and it is a very discrete point, and on that basis, I don't believe it has a ripple effect. I wouldn't want to comment on council's advice any further.
Thank you, Emma. I mean, I think probably worth reiterating that this is a particular case, and I think it's you know, if we'd had more time, we would perhaps just have sorted out the council constitution first. But obviously, we wanted to make sure that the trade had certainty, and otherwise we would have been having to bring this report potentially to a January cabinet meeting. So I don't think that's really acceptable, considering that otherwise this would be starting in January without this report having been approved. The report in front of us is the same report that went to the licensing committee. It's got the same recommendations in it, and well, I won't prejudge the decision that we're about to take, but I think I'd be pretty surprised if the same decision is not taken. So it seems to me to be just a way of making sure that we have properly got a decision that can be fully stood behind for this council. All of that bearing in mind, has anyone got any further questions or comments? No. Okay, in which case, can I remind you of the recommendations that are in front of us, which is to approve the delay, and is everyone happy to agree that? Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, in which case, I think it only falls to me to remind you of the dates of future meetings. Our next meeting is on the 10th of December. I suspect there'll be a little bit more business on the agenda, but thank you all very much for attending. Close the meeting.